Hey, so we are looking at the ideologies of change. These ideologies of change are going to come out in the first half of the 19th century. We're going to look at how it's the 19th century responses to industrialization and reactionary political movements. We're going to continue to develop this political spectrum. The ones that we've already defined conservatism, and we've already defined reactionary, the autocracy. That word autocracy means absolutism. So the right wing we're pretty good on through the class. But today we're going to be talking about classical liberalism, socialism, and communism. Those are going to be the brown elements that we're looking at. So let's go and jump in. Here's a wonderful painting that really embodies the revolutionary spirit of Europe in the 1830s and 40s. And again, we're going to see this especially tomorrow in our lecture. As we contextualize, you were coming out of an era in which that we have the failed promises of the Enlightenment and the French Revolution, these kind of romantic hopes of republicanism, of liberty, equality, fraternity. They didn't become real, and they collapsed into an era of reactionaryism. These reactionary states, such as France, especially when we get Charles X in power, Metternich is really dominating the area. Industrialization and urbanization, it didn't bring the progress for the lower classes. There's frustration and anger. And there's going to be this disenfranchised, that you have the disenfranchised and disillusioned. This is going to be the liberal philosophers, that middle class, that rising bourgeoisie, and then the laboring classes. And they're going to combat it. The middle class is really going to be focused on enlightened ideas, the idea of enfranchisement through suffrage. The laboring classes are going to look at a redistribution of wealth, and we're going to see that. So now we're going to kind of look at this concept of liberalism. This is classical liberalism today. During the 19th century, it was just liberalism. This is going to be a British bourgeois perspective. These are going to be the great thinkers that we've already discussed, but we're just going to kind of place it here. We know about Adam Smith. We know about David Ricardo, and we know about Thomas Malthus. But when we think of liberalism, it dates all the way back to 1690 with the Two Treatises on Government from Locke. This is the product of the Glorious Revolution. There's an absolute belief in equality and liberty. The social contract theory is a significant element that defines the power of government. And they demanded the enlightened ideals such as representative government, freedom of speech, press, assembly, worship, and from arbitrary arrests. So again, we're just seeing this kind of this constitutionalism, and this liberalism is really, there's a belief that the government can represent the people rather than dominate. We talked about Adam Smith's influences throughout the class for the last 2 months. This is that economic liberalism, the idea of laissez-faire economics. It's reacting against the mercantilism of the age, and they're trying to say, hey, we need that invisible hand of the marketplace with the natural laws of supply and demand and of competition we've defined. And if you need to go back to the Enlightenment through some of your research, you can do that. And again, the main focus here, the government must limit its infringements upon individual liberty and freedom. Remember, Adam Smith believed there was 3 jobs of government: military protection of borders, policing, protection of private property, and the development of public works. So again, this is that element definitely of the bourgeoisie. This is really going to benefit them. Then we talked a little bit about 19th century liberalism already. Thomas Malthus is an essay on principle of population. We talked about the idea in which he argued that natural population growth will always lead to natural catastrophes such as famine, war, plague. Government must limit its unnatural support, because if you unnaturally support populations, the catastrophes will be exponentially worse. So really, in 1798, he's really looking at a world that's really kind of miserable, and I think that really the element really connects to what we're talking about. We talk about how David Ricardo's iron law of wages, that idea the unskilled liberal must determine wages. unnaturally high wages would cause economic catastrophe as it would disrupt the natural flow of capital. So when we see this, Malthus and Ricardo, they're building upon Locke, they're building upon Smith. They're saying, hey, these are the ideas of the government, and there's a limit to the government's power. But when we look at this, as we kind of get into the 19th century, I want to point out there's limits to liberalism. When I say limits, they don't achieve this never-ending progress. Liberalism provided the English bourgeois perspective to the government, opposing traditional privilege. So that's a good thing, getting away from traditional privilege, right? But the working class is ignored, as the bourgeoisie believed only through individualism and self-will can people rise above the phrase. The idea that if you're poor, you deserve to be poor because you're not doing enough. So this perspective and the government and other elements will only hurt you. They believed that the urban blight of cholera, poverty, and misery would be solved through market forces. That the natural law of supply and demand, if there's an issue with cholera, that creates a marketplace of demand for cholera fixing, and that's when the bourgeois would invest. Poverty, once again, people who will want to work will work. So those elements, that there should not be any quote unquote handouts. The English liberals really began to schism by the 1830s as education, need for welfare, and the unequal distribution of wealth and resources really needed to be addressed. I like this illustration. This illustration is from an early 19th century publication. It demonstrates the poverty, the overpopulation of that area. We see misery. But what the classical liberals would say is, well, they have untapped energy. They can create for themselves, and that creates a kind of an element. I'm going to pause here